Today, we become legends.
With the launch of open beta for Smite 2, Conquest, specifically the jungle, got quite a few changes, and how you start the game has also changed. Here's everything you need to know for all roles in terms of stats in a quick format. Starting off with the carry and support, which both start at the purple buff, clear that, and then head to duo lane. You then clear the first wave and poke, then clear the second wave, after which the local jungle camps have spawned, like the rotating buff camp and the side jungle camp, so these will be your next play after wave 2. If you have a lot of pressure, going for an invade on the enemy side back harpies is best, but risky. Otherwise, just take one of the neutrally placed camps or your own side back harpies. After this, there's no hard and fast rules on what to do, and the match evolves from there based on how the early waves went. But always keep in mind, and this goes for all laning roles actually, junglers often first get active for a gank around the second wave, so pay extra attention when clearing that and keep an eye on your map. If you see the enemy jungle in mid or solo for their first gank, you can push more aggressively, but if you don't see them on the map, they might be coming to duo for an early gank, so play careful. Mid laners will generally start in lane as they can't effectively clear a buff quickly on their own without missing minions in lane. However, there have been some starts that involve jungle and mid both doing red buff at the start, then mid heads to lane, but this start is far less common, and if you're not duo queuing these two roles, it can be hard to get people to do it. So the safest, most typical start for mid laners is just in lane. You'll clear the first wave, then the second wave, after which local camps will spawn just like in duo, and you can grab stuff like the gold pile, rotating buff camp, or oracles. Do these with your jungler if they're around by this time, which is pretty likely. Also keep in mind that around the time of the second wave, the enemy jungler will have hit level 2, and it's pretty likely they're roaming near mid. So be aware of that and don't get caught out. The reverse is also true. Your own jungler might be looking to gank at this time, so pay attention and be ready to fight or flee depending on the situation. Speaking of the jungler, this is the role with the most varied starts, as there are multiple ways to go, and it also depends on how your other teammates want to start, like with the red buff mid laner start that I just mentioned. The most typical start for a jungler though is speed buff and double back camps, which will give you level 2. That's the main goal of any jungle start. Get level 2 as quickly as possible so you can be threatening for a gank, or just have 2 abilities up to clear more camps more quickly and get level 3 and so on. This start gives you level 2 very quickly, and you can choose which of these 2 back camps to take in order to hit 2. You can take the Cyclops camp if you're going for an early mid gank, and you can take the Harpy camp if you're going for an early duo lane gank to be closer to the lane that you want to gank. As mentioned, there are plenty of starts junglers can do, and if you wanted to, for example, go for an early level 2 surprise gank on solo lane, which isn't typical, you'd want to start red buff instead of speed to be closer to solo. But the most common and accepted start is speed buff into double back camps, then decide where you're going from there. Speaking of solo lane, the most common start there is to start in lane. Most solo laners without a jungle starter item can't solo their blue buff without missing lane minions for it, which is why you start in lane now. If you want to go a jungle starter item though, you can start at your blue. However, I would expect jungle starters to get nerfed for laners pretty soon, as it's not something high-res wants to be common, so I wouldn't rely on these starts that require you to go a jungle starter item for the extra clear, which is why I recommend starting in lane for solo. I think once these jungle starter items get nerfed a bit more, they will fall out of the meta, and this will become by far the most common start. But at least as of right now, the jungle starter is an option if you want to start at your blue. There's also a more advanced start you can try if you're more comfortable in the role, where you proxy the enemy minion wave behind their tier 1 tower, then clear the small minions from their blue buff, which gives you level 2. Then you head to lane or your own blue buff. This one can be harder to execute though, depending on your level 1 wave clear, and you can get caught out in enemy territory if they sniff out that you're doing this. So the more typical standard start of just going to lane is safer. As with duo and mid, local camps will start spawning around the second wave, so after you clear that out, you should be looking to take stuff like totem, gold camp, or your side back harpies for extra farm. If you have a lot of pressure, you can invade the enemy back harpies for extra bonus farm. Do keep in mind with all of these starts that things can change based on early ganks, certain matchups, early invades, or your team doing a non-typical start, so be ready to adapt to what's going on in the current match, but for a normal game without any crazy invades or atypical starts, these are what you should go for. Hopefully this quick guide helped you out, and don't forget to drop a like before you leave if it did. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.